Okay, here we are. Hello, one and all. My name is
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Cullinan has joined us. I'm Garrett Monroe, and we are the co-directors of Tabletop EDU. You found the Tabletop EDU podcast, where we talk about all things teaching and learning with tabletop role-playing games, some of our favorite stuff in the world. Tonight, we are talking about just some practical ideas for bringing role play games into your classroom or your teaching environment. We have a couple announcements from recent happenings with Tabletop EDU, exciting stuff. A couple shout outs, and we're going to start with that stuff. But first off, what's new with you, Dr. Collin, and what's happening?
Yeah, hey, Marianne here, Dr. Cullinan, Calliope. And what's new with me is it's the start of another school year. It's great. Just this week, I started with my student DMs. I've got 13 of them this year. So we're going to have a nice, healthy set of tables for our TTRPG club, which is called Heroes Hall. We usually have between 30 and 60 kids, and we'll have lots of room with student DMs. So that's really exciting. I've got about half of them are coming back from last year, and about half are new recruits. So it's exciting. We're just starting to get thinking about what it is to be a dungeon master and a peer leader and a storyteller. We've got lots of ideas and excitement, so all that's really fun.
13
Uh,
student
yeah,
DMs. That's really
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. And so typically in a middle school setting, I have them pair up, unless every once in a while I've got one that's particularly strong. But there's just myself and one other adult, my community volunteer, who is wonderful. But because students are DMing other students, I like them to be in pairs so they can support each other, and for practical reasons too, if someone's absent. We don't have to fold the whole table. Yeah, so it's fun. We're just getting started. The first adventure we always do, I want to give a little shout out to, it's called the Laureate Trial. And it's by Monique Franson, and you can find it on Drive Through RPG and things like that. And it's this great little module that she wrote that is for first time DMs and first time players. And the shtick of it is that you are trying to get a job with the Laureate Guild, and so you have to prove yourself by going through 3 different kinds of trials. And the first one teaches the DMs and the players how to do ability checks. The second one's a puzzle, and then the third one is combat. And I love that. And we retrofit it a little bit, reskin it to be how students get licensed to adventure for the year within the fiction of our game. And we have a big dicing ceremony at the end where everybody gets their official license. They get a physical license with their character name on it, signed by their DMs, and we have a knighting ceremony.
Oh.
And everybody, as their first adventure, gets their first 20-sided die to keep. It's
Ooh.
really great. Yeah, and so that's what's happening for me. That's my big excitement in TTRPGs. What's going on with you, Garrett?
Yeah, no, I started a new position. I'm working with Cuyahoga Community College, which is just a fantastic, it's one of the largest community colleges in the country. They have a little over 20,000 students. They have 1,400 faculty.
Wow.
Huge, yeah, really exciting place. Just a ton going on. Huge instructional design team. And they just need a lot of help. You get into some of these courses and you work with some faculty and they are just overwhelmed. And there's so much teaching online now and blended
Right?
teaching. And so many people are not ready for it. So, students and faculty alike. But it's a really exciting, there's huge libraries across all these campuses. And so being able to talk to faculty and about TTRPGs, how they work is like gateway drugs for academic literacies and literacy more generally, and how we can do community impact with area schools and so forth. It just has me really fired up in a new way. And also really putting to work some of the ideas we expound in the book about how do you advocate for this stuff when you're working within institutions and against bureaucracies. And so I'm like, oh yeah, here we are. You're like unresponded
Right.
emails and people who don't get it. And it's, yeah, I need to really. But then you find the people who it clicks with, and you're like, okay, let's build a coalition. We can start assembling some kindling. And so that's exciting. I was sharing with you right before we started, and I'll make an announcement here. We are going to NASAGA, the conference, this October, which is is it North American Simulations and Games Association?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think so.
they?
Station Gaming Journal. Love
Yeah, they have a
that.
great
So
journal.
exciting.
Yes, and we were invited to do the keynote on Saturday. Yeah, very exciting. The topic is a little bit of a new articulation, and so this is a session I'll be running. If you it's you can still register if you want to show up in person and do it. Basically, what I'm running is a professional development session for educators using tabletop RPGs. And so the idea is to build fellowship and think about leadership. And there's a lot of reflection. And so basically, teachers will be invited to create this sort of alter ego, this heroic manifestation of some of their principles and values as an educator. Then they're invited to do a little world building where they become headmaster or a leader in some capacity of this school they design. So they get to decide what setting it's in. Is it like high fantasy? Is it sci-fi? Is it a modern school? They just want to think of, like, if I had all the control, how would I build a school, and what would I look like in that school? So they're invited to build this character in this setting, and then we all we do some speed networking, and we share ideas about what really motivates us and so forth. And then we come together at the end to do a little bit of questing as a party to take on this like epic challenge. So the hope is really just to have people rethink about what has them excited about being an educator and reconnect with some ideas in their professional persona. It's like doing drab professional development, but with TTRPGs. So it's new
Yes.
stuff. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So that's happening. So I'm just going to dive into some other announcements.
That sounds great.
I want to give a shout out to Steph from TTRPG Kids, who's running a really cool looking project on BackerKit called Story Guider. We'll share the link in our newsletter and on Discord. Story Guider. Steph does just amazing work. They do
They're
really.
great.
Yeah, they're just incredible with TTRPG Kids. They're just nonstop and they just produce. And so check them out if you don't. But yeah, they've got a great product. We're going to support it and we hope you check it out. They're interactive coloring books for kids. And so they bring a lot of originality to their products, and I really appreciate their design, really thoughtful design with their products. So shout out to them.
They have a great little book called Making a TTRPG for Your Particular Kid that has a little couple pages from yours truly in it. That's incredible. I love that, and
On my bookshelf.
I can't wait to see what else they come up with. So yes,
Yeah.
please support them.
Yeah.
And speaking of books, we are getting so close. I can almost taste the pages of our written book, Garrett. It's coming. We
Yeah.
understand that it's packed up and on its way, so we are just waiting for it to come through the mail.
Yeah, it has been delayed. Again, we apologize. It's just taken longer than we thought to really bring all the bonus materials. Like, we unlocked so much with that campaign we never even dreamed of unlocking. And so a lot of it's been just bogged down by how do we get these card decks designed and printed, and how do we get the supplements, and then how do we get it all boxed, and we got hit with some trade war stuff. But it's moving, it's on its way to us. They're really gorgeous boxes. I think about half of the people who ordered the book also got the card deck. Like, those went out. We're also giving a bunch of those away. Even if you didn't order it, you might end up with a card deck in your box. So they really put together a beautiful boxing of that. There's some other goodies we're throwing in the box as well, some digital codes and some other promos, including for our course series, which you just wrapped up the inaugural test run of our course. But yeah, so people
sure
should,
did.
and we're going to talk about that in just a second, but people should be able to expect those physical books by the end of October is what we think. That's when you think you'll have it, right around Halloween. You'll have that, which is excellent timing, really, when it comes to role-play games. Happy Halloween, hopefully. And then we can't wait to work with you and build on those ideas, and get those out there, because this is a community project, and we're creating a hive mind. Like, the only way this works is by sharing ideas. The book itself is built on tons of research, tons of work, tons of interviews, tons of anecdotes. And so we're just trying to create a space where it all comes together. So we want to hear more, and we want to wind up more projects that invite you to collaborate. The course is one of them. And so tell us, Marianne, a little bit about how did the course go? We had some awesome volunteers who signed up to run our course, a 5-week course based on the book that was fun. You and I spent a couple months preparing and recording videos and designing some activities, and then you ran a weekly live session with 2 groups.
Yeah, that's right. So the way the course works right now is that the lessons are pre-recorded and it's self-paced, but the live part of the cohort we did for 5 weeks, and each week highlighted some of the main ideas in that week. We did a lot of focus on the CATS model and how to create games for your classroom, because that was the will of the people. And we also did some playing together so that we could model sort of how to be an educational DM and have some fun together. So it was really great. Everybody was awesome. One of the people, Jordan, works in a school that is exclusively for students with autism, and it was really amazing to see some of the work that he has started doing around social skills and using role-playing games for social skills, and some of his ideas about using cartoons to talk to aliens, and how do we take perspective by building cartoons without a shared language in that fiction of aliens landing and things like that. So it was a lot of really neat games and ideas and a lot of good camaraderie. So I certainly would love to see more people sometime soon. We'll have some more live sessions at some point, probably in the new year, and it was really nice to have that collective thinking. And that's, as you said, the hive mind earlier. I think that for me is the most important piece, is this idea that, like, when we play role-playing games, we go as a party. And
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
dangerous to go alone. Take this, right? That's the whole idea. Let's go together and take us instead of a sword.
Yeah. No, it's such a great modality, because instead of the silly hierarchies that humans like to build in other institutions and bureaucracies, when you use the frame of the tabletop role-playing game, it's instantly more playful and fun. It instantly lowers the playing field, and people don't get hung up on all this other stuff, and we can just get down to the exciting business of communicating and connecting. And this is why I think it's such an exciting frame to do work, even to just do work. If we can do work through role play, that's really fascinating, I think. So
For sure.
that's what we're talking about. We're talking about learning through role play. There's a whole concept of the book. So of course we want to teach our course using that frame, and we want to learn from you guys through play.
One of the things that came out of the course that I think is really interesting is, I think, because teachers care so much about students and want to be really successful, a lot of people are putting pressure on themselves to try to make, like, their entire course a game.
Yeah.
Or think in these really broad strokes, but I would really encourage people to start small.
Yep.
We want you to use a role-playing game as an educational, sort of pedagogical choice, if it's the best choice. Right? There are times where we won't use a role-playing game. And there are times where you'll want to, and trying to be like, I can only use this if I completely change my entire curriculum and way of teaching for the entire school year for 180 plus days.
No.
That is that idea of letting the perfect get in the way of the good.
Yeah.
Right? And so one of the things that we really think about in the course and in the book is starting small, or really thinking about how can I take something that I already either don't like teaching or doesn't feel like it resonates with kids, and then start there, because it's already something that's no great loss, right? Because you're already not enjoying teaching it or not feeling like it's effective, and it can have the biggest bang for the buck. And then as you get more comfortable doing these short-term games and role plays and simulations, then you might string them together in a larger narrative context, or you might not, and either way is okay.
Yeah, and it's something you could build. Many of us teach the same course year after year, and so it might be something you build brick by brick, lesson by lesson, module by module over the course of time and figure out what works. It does, in some case, I want to speak with two truths here, two opposite truths. One is take some risks, have some fun with it, go for it. And you don't need a lot to make it work. You don't need to
No.
over design it, and you don't need to overthink it sometimes. Since it's the simplest frames, you just think of use a term from drama, like the simplest sort of problem. When we look at like a drama or a play, like there's a central problem. What like two families, two rival families in Verona have
Right.
kids that are falling in love. What are we going to do? And how do we resolve that? And so coming up with a compelling big question or drama is one of the great ideas in narrative thinking or literature. But then what's so cool about the TTRPG frame is, guess what? You have agency. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? You're there. You're a part of it. So then saying, who are you? And inviting to play with that. And so it's in some ways just thinking, how do we dress up a story problem a little bit? And it could just be a problem at the end of the unit or the lesson that we might take a little time, work on a little more. So yeah, what I was trying to talk about, yeah. So take a risk, go for it. But then on the other hand, like trying to bite off too much and do everything within this frame can be really overwhelming. And don't become too much of a I have this problem where I like to just build and make it perfect and make it perfect, and it's not quite right. And like you said, don't make perfect become the enemy of good. One of the
Right.
illustrations we use in the book is Oedipus Rex. And I give an example of a unit plan for that. And rather than have the entire unit be a role play, it's not like we're doing in that unit, they're not doing role play every session, but rather it's something they do for about a third of the time. And then they take time to step out of the experience and then talk about the text, talk about the role play, work on their presentations or their projects, and do more kind of traditional ELA stuff. And so that's an example of this mixed model we use. That's in the book about preparation for future learning, where doing a simulation or a game experience or role play experience has been proven to better create better retention for students who later engage in traditional learning at that content. Yeah, it just would be unwieldy to do the whole course or our unit as a TTRPG experience.
Also, one of the things we know to be true about learning is that reflective piece is really important. So if we're always in role play all of the time, then we're not doing that reflection and that planning. And that's really that metacognition and that sort of thinking about what did I learn? What did I do well? What would it feel like? How do I feel as who I am versus that? All of that is really important for the learning and isn't something that can happen if you're always in character. I think we're also it's really important to think flexibly about what role playing is. One of the things we did in the course was talk about Hiawatha and the formation of the Iroquois Confederacy, which I did not learn about as a kid, but is really neat and is actually something that a bunch of Native American tribes came together and created a constitution that was part of the model of the U.S. Constitution. And also, happy Constitution Day. It's Constitution Day tomorrow, so happy birthday,
Oh,
Constitution. It's a state law in New Hampshire that everybody learns about the Constitution on Constitution Day, so
that's
there you go.
important. No, in some places in the country, we're still following the Constitution, so that's something to
Yeah.
celebrate too. Yeah, yeah, that's still
Yes.
yeah, yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep.
But that in that case, I'm always very thoughtful about if the ultimate conclusion of the story can be different than what actually happened in history,
Yeah, yeah.
then that's not history anymore. That's speculative fiction, right? If the Nazis can win World War II, we're no longer playing a history game.
Right.
But so in that kind of case, it's not necessarily appropriate to be a variety of characters. In this case, everyone plays Hiawatha.
Yep.
In this case, we collectively are working as Hiawatha to try to go to all the different tribal nations and speak to them about what they need and want, and then try to come up with a constitution that's going to work for everybody. And then take our constitution that we came up in roleplay and have a reflective time to then compare it to what was actually created. And that's where the learning happens. So there is this place of, because he's a very fascinating character, he's very charming. This is the historical person, was known to have been an incredibly gifted orator. He is the mouthpiece for someone who has an incredible stutter. But also, some of these other nations, one of them killed his entire family. And it for real. And so he had to come to terms with his own personal tragedy versus sort of the collective good. This is ripe for role play and reflection, right? Like, for role play, even if it's writing, even if it's not out loud, like, what would you do if that was you? And so in that case, it might look different than what you would expect a role-playing game to look like. It could be, right, the more things that you get into your constitution that reflect the constitution that Hiawatha created, the better chance you have of convincing people to join the Confederacy or something like that. So I guess in terms of go for it, I would highly recommend that people just think outside the box. This does not have to look like a typical after school or around your table on the weekends TTRPG session. This can look as different as you want it to in service of the content and the goals that you have for your students.
Oh my gosh! I just want to say also as an aside, in our book Adventures of Teaching and Learning, one of the settings is Briartar Northwood Outpost, which was inspired by the Northwoods of Michigan, Hiawatha National Forest. There's a great setting for some of this to take. Although the Iroquois Nation, as I understand it, operated a lot further south, a lot of these events, but not to get too into the weeds with some of it. But they gave him a national forest. They gave him a national forest way up in the boonies where I grew up, so I spent a lot of time.
I don't know how far. I have to admit that I have some ignorance in exactly how far the Iroquois Nation ended up going west. But yeah, it's an incredible story centered around New York State, the greater New York State, which isn't that far from Michigan, really.
No, Great Lakes area. Yeah. Have you documented any of that lesson, any of that work anywhere, or is that just something you've run in-house?
That was something that we did for the classroom, or for the class, but it's certainly something that we could put together and make more public.
That's a great illustration of that point we try to reiterate of design something for the learning outcomes, design something for the context. Don't try to transplant your favorite game when it might not fit, and tear all that extra stuff out that doesn't align, that doesn't really fit. And I also say, again, speaking out of both sides of my mouth, there are some aspects that I would invite, like even if they don't align with the learning outcome, give room for that creative expression and that agency, because that's what makes it so fun, right? So find a way for that to be a part of how students are assessed for their learning and how they show their learning. So this is a great segue into the topic of ePortfolios, actually. And if we want to go there, unless I heard that you had somebody else.
Yeah, let's do it.
So ePortfolios is my sort of latest thing.
I can't wait to hear about ePortfolios.
ePortfolios.
Tell me more, Garrett.
I think they are like the sexiest thing in instructional design, period. Like I think they just solve all the problems that we talk about as educators interested in like active learning, engaged learning, progressive learning, project-based learning. They solve problems of assessment and documentation and authentic learning. So ePortfolios are essentially, or portfolio learning is essentially a way in which you might organize a course around a site that a student builds. So they essentially own a website that they install reflections on and projects, and like basically all their work gets ended up, or much of their work gets ended up on their ePortfolio in some capacity. So maybe by the end of the course, they've completed a couple like mini projects that culminates in a big project. So by the end, they're going to say, look at all this learning that happened in all these different modalities. So it captures this holistic, rich tapestry of all the ways in which students can demonstrate their learning. And it's also, so on the one hand, it's a great solution generally for especially online or blended learning when it's hard to get active learning to happen and there's a lot of like lecture and listening. Here we can capture those different pieces and put them in a place that lives outside of like a teacher's folder or outside of a learning management system. The student owns it, right? So now it's, this is my space And I need to show collectively what I'm doing in the course and what I've learned. And what's really exciting is it has been shown to promote metacognition or improved achievement from first generation college students and this sort of thing. It allows them to kind of like reflect on their learning over time and see the kind of progress they've made over time. So what's really cool is if they have e-portfolios outside of a course structure, like over the course of years. And so they can see, oh my goodness, who did I want to be and what was my writing like and what was I up to in year one or year two or year three. And so they might take like a signature assignment from each course and install them on a big mastery portfolio. But finally, let me get to TTRPGs. And so I think ePortfolios solve a lot of problems that tabletop RPGs present for teaching and learning. And one of them is documenting and assessment. And so it's hard to capture the richness of what happens in a tabletop RPG. Oftentimes, we design these games in different ways, so they're going to be doing different things based on what you're running. But there's, of course, the live play session, but there's also maybe a character sheet. Maybe there's students doing world building, they're doing research, maybe they're doing a performance. And so maybe they're building maps or other artifacts. All those things fit wonderfully nicely into an e-portfolio. So we can really show administrators and others, hey, this stuff, and also students, look at this stuff you're doing. Look at this amazing work you're doing. And then it's also social. So students can look and visit the extent to which you want to toggle that privacy and that sharing on. They can go and check out each other's and you can pull up exemplars and say, look at how XYZ did this and they really did a fantastic job and how might you do that? And so you could also invite them to go leave comments and so forth. So I also wanted to, this is a point you had earlier, and then I'm going to throw the ball at you. I think it makes there's many different ways of doing it. And so I think it solves that problem of I'm having a hard time building my whole course as a role playing or a scenario or a game. The ePortfolio as a role play, as a course level role play is an interesting solution that would allow you to dip in and out of this. And so one of the modalities, and I've created a quadrant, I'm going to share my screen really quick of this framework I've been working on actually. And this has come out of can you see my screen here?
Yeah, can you describe what you were looking at here
Yeah.
for the list at
So
home?
Yeah, so there's different ways of doing this. And in the upper right is what I've been describing, which is the narrative RPG party. And so I've built this quadrant of different styles or archetypes of how ePortfolios could work with with role play games or role play teaching and learning. These are ways in which I have heard others use it, ways in which I've done it, and then there's one in which I'm imagining a way in which it might be deployed just to complete the framework. So I actually haven't heard anybody do it that way. But so this narrative RPG in the upper right is high collaboration, which is our X axis, and high fantasy or high fantastical on our Y. So this is like D&D 5e, the kind of games you maybe grew up playing or you play on the weekend. A lot of Adventures of Teaching and Learning talks about this sort of gameplay. This works for ePortfolios really well. But this other one I'm going to talk about for a second in the bottom left is what I call the professional persona ePortfolio. I've heard of this done, and I've also run a course for pre-service teachers that use this frame. It essentially invites a student to imagine themselves as a future self. Say, for instance, 5 years down the road, you're starting to become a teacher, you haven't done your licensure exams, but now you've gotten your first teaching job. What kind of teacher are you? What's your life like? What courses are you teaching? And so the role play is create a website. This is what I did with my students. You could do it different ways, but they created a website that was speaking to their students from the perspective of being that teacher and speaking to their parents as well. So they would upload like lesson plans or announcements and like learning objectives. It was like a place for them to share with their students and their family what's going on. And so throughout the course, they would build different artifacts, different lessons and research and learning outcomes and so forth. And by the end of the course, they had a beautiful website that kind of showed perhaps to a future employer the kind of work they could do and the skills they have. So they would do like a podcast and a video and all this sort of thing. So it's a fun role play that they spend a lot of time thinking about as a student when they do those projects, but it's not necessarily one that you have to be like rolling dice with or sacrificing or not as a sacrificing, but committing a lot of actual course time for role play sessions. But there's still a lot of interesting kind of imagination that happens with that's connected to the coursework. Yeah, let me stop there, get your reaction before going on a total rant with this topic.
I think one of the things that's interesting about this professional persona idea too is that when people are younger, they put themselves in a high fantasy version of this all the time. That's part of why everyone loves Harry Potter,
Yes.
right? Kids don't really want to be in school, but they want to be in fantasy school where no one actually seems to go to class most of the time and they run around having adventures, right? And
Yeah.
you think about like that, how what would it would be like in the common room and the dining room and all those things. But I think this professional persona quadrant might be particularly effective for older students or students who aren't high fantasy people, right? There are people who love realistic fiction, and that's wonderful too. That's why we have both genres. And it does allow for that reflection. I think that, so one of the things that you haven't talked about yet is the one along the x axis that's high collaborative, uh, but
Yeah.
a lower fantasy, more realistic, and just that idea, or it could be higher fantasy and be up in that narrative RPG quadrant, is that idea of the collective e-portfolio. And I don't think that necessarily it would be entirely collective, but connected so that
Yeah.
everybody can see what everybody else did to contribute. How did we do this together? I think that's a really interesting too. So if one kid's doing a map, then everybody in the party can see the map and use it. And so in this quadrant, it says scenario simulation, something like a mock council or a committee, a lab team. It's a more realistic simulation. And I think that
This is
this is
Hiawatha,
so
right?
key.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Even though that's that historical fiction idea where we're
Right.
still historical, there are things that you have to hit. It's not high fantasy. But uh, I think that collaborative aspect is one of those sort of side benefits to TTRPGs and simulations that are well beyond
Yeah.
just I now know this content, right? Because ultimately that's not going to be enough. Even that is a key piece that must happen, but is not enough on its own. And then the other quadrant is the narrative persona, which is individual but a higher fantasy
Yeah.
individual um, project, and that it would be we do something that's a solo RPG creative writing
You're right.
at our school with eighth graders called Lighthouse at the End of the World, where it's a gothic horror where you are a solitary lighthouse keeper on a lighthouse that's between Argentina and Antarctica during the Age of Sail. And that was a real place, but all the rest of it is high gothic horror. But that's the idea, right? Because at the end, you have this diary and you have all these artifacts that you've
Oh yes.
collected over your time, and you have a narrative story of your time there.
You're doing this.
So,
You're doing this already.
which I did
Yes.
not realize until I looked at this. So there you
Yeah.
go. Thank you for teaching me.
No, I think
But
it
right,
yeah, it
but
validates the
I
model.
would. Yes, and I would imagine that a lot of the listeners are doing this, at least one of these quadrants already. And so, to circle back to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, the reflective piece is where the learning happens, right? We just had Marianne in real time go reflect on
Yeah.
what I'm doing and realize that this is one of the things in this model. And taking that time, I think that's the other piece of the e-portfolio, right? It allows you to come out of the fiction and then reflect on what you learned and push back into that reflection. I have managed to go 36 minutes and 52 seconds without mentioning Gary Allen Fine, but this is very Gary Allen Fine, right? I'm pushing in and out of the fiction, in and out of from me to fictional me to me wanting to be successful in this class. And it's tripping back and forth between those frames and allowing that reflection and metacognition is really the learning that happens. And then the fiction is the hook.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point that maybe another way of thinking about those frames that Gary Allen Fine described as metacognition. It's how a neuroscientist or a cognitive psychologist would describe it, which is the gold standard for critical thinking. That's how we get to the good stuff. And let's yeah, go ahead.
I would add that it's looking at why and how you flip back and forth between those frames. Really, that right? The different frames of TTRPG is this rich soil, but you have to go back and actually plant the seeds.
Yeah. if you're not going
Make
back
the
and doing it.
garden grow.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's where ePortfolios create a really durable, visible, sometimes social space to do that, where those reflections are logged in a beautiful place that a student owns and that maybe has an authentic audience, such as their peers and their teacher, other than like a journal or a scrap of paper that some kid loses when you ask him to do a reflection or whatnot, or again, it's stuck on an LMS somewhere. But hey, let's put it here. And students are often, by the time we're done with the course I've teaching ePortfolios, they really love going back and looking at this thing they've built. It's validating and it's something they're proud of often to say, oh my goodness, we have done a ton of work here. And it's more memorable and meaningful to them often to say, hey, look at this experience we had. So yeah, I think it is. I'm gonna keep riding this for a while. This is my new hobby horse, is like riding the ePortfolio, like building this out a little more and discussing more resources to bring that into the mix of how we use TTRPGs. But it's just one articulation of how to do it. There's many ways to do it. It gives me an excuse as an instructional designer where a lot of our work is tied to technology. And people sometimes look at it and say, "What are we talking about? Role play games?" But if I can talk about it in terms of ePortfolios, it's articulated to the tech piece, which people who aren't into games and learning digs. What? Yeah, we're getting to the end of our time. I also wanted to do a drawing for our next grant winner, but I wanted to throw it back at you if there's anything else you wanted to add in, bring up, or closing thoughts.
I guess I would say if you are at PAX Unplugged at the end of November, I know it's early days, but if you're there, I'll be there doing some work with Jennifer Genova, our collaborator and friend of Tabletop EDU, who we love so much, and Ben Beck, who wrote one of our
Yay!
digital supplements that'll be coming up soon. So yeah, and so that's really exciting. So if you're going to be there, shoot me a line on Discord or on my email, my Marianne at tabletop.edu.org email, because I'd love to see you. And so I'm just starting to think about that and what kind of research can be done over the course of the school year. I would love to hear what people are doing, right? We love to collaborate and co-think with you, because when the guard attacks one party member, we all roll for initiative, right? So let's do this work together. I am super excited to see that keynote that you're going to be doing, Garrett. So that's really cool. I'm so excited to get the book in my hands, which hopefully it's coming, man. It's coming. And I'm so
Yes.
excited about it.
I want to run a demo of the keynote in the Discord, so watch out.
Yeah.
That's going to be the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So I want to run this with some of our people
100%.
before I bring it to the conference. A good idea. So watch out for that. But let's do a quick drawing where we have
Yes. Drum roll,
56.
please.
Let me just give you a little peek behind the curtain how this works.
Oh,
We have, this is just how simple this is. We have a Google form that we've shared the link to in our announcement. It's on Discord. It's just, hey, submit some info for us if you're interested in the after school TTRPG grant program. You can win $200. You can spend it however you want on your club. We suggest buying books or throwing a party or other durable resources. You maybe something, maybe anointing or inviting some of your students to become leaders, to become DMs, which we think is the ultimate goal, is having your students start to become game masters. And so maybe getting them a suite of books they can take home and run and build, but however you want to do it. So we have the form, and then I'm just taking the instances. Right now we have 56 people. It's relatively small, good odds. I'm just going to do a random number picker 1 to 56, and I'm going to re-roll if we get somebody who's already run it. Here's the number. It's literally number one. We just picked number
wow.
one.
So this is the opposite of a critical fail this time.
Yeah, this is the very first person who filled out the form, who is Spencer Graybeal from Faith Christian Academy in Burlington, North Carolina. Burlington.
Love it. That's so great. Might
Yeah.
I recommend, if you have trouble with your players and DMs keeping track of their physical character sheets, we have recently bought 5-gallon buckets with lids, where every
Ooh,
week they can just open it up. There's the books can fit in there, all the stuff fits in there. They do it all, they put it all back in the bucket, close it up for the next week. So there you go. There's a durable good that you can spend some of
the
your
buckets.
$200 on. Sometimes
Where
it's
are you getting
ePortfolios. Sometimes it's just 5 gallon buckets. It all works together.
bucket folios? And are they? What are we talking about? Home Depot, Lowe's? What are we? What team are we?
Ours are very sleek black buckets from Amazon.
Black buckets.
You know,
Yes.
that way it's got a fantastical feel,
Yeah,
like
I
golf
like that.
buckets.
Big dice
But
cups too, if you wanted to roll
yeah,
up some.
exactly. Now, this is so great. We would love to get some photos or feedback or just hear from you about how you did spend it. But we're not going to spend a lot of time chasing, making people give us receipts and things like that. You're all really
Oh yeah.
busy. Spend that emotional energy and thinking energy on doing great work with your kids.
Yeah, we're gonna run the grants for a couple more months through the end of the year, I think is what it is, and hopefully then we're gonna try to find some patrons or some new fundraising, some new programs, and structure it a little more. Maybe tie it to some research, but for now, it's really just taking the crowdfunding success we had and sharing it with the community, and whatever you can share with us back in terms of, as Marianne said, photos or information or inspiration, we would love that. I think that's it for this episode of the TTRPG Tabletop EDU podcast. Thank you for joining us. You can find us on tabletopEDU.org. You join us on Discord where there is chat, occasional TTRPG games with the Educators TTRPG Play Network. We're going to shoot out a update on Kickstarter and through our email as well.
That's right. We're hoping that you're having a great start to your school year if you're doing that. And we are looking forward to talking to you and hearing from you and having you let us know what you're doing.
Okay, see you next time. Thank you.